Aiy-yu-kwee, Nakna Melina, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be talking about my review of Angeline Boulley's Firekeeper's Daughter. The book is set to come out March 16th of 2021. It is a YA thriller. Thank you to Henry Holt and Company for the e-arc, as well as Libro FM for the advanced listeners copy. I do want to say that this is not an Own Voices review. It is an Own Voices book. Angeline Boulley is Sault Ste. Marie of the Chippewa Indians, and the book follows the Ojibwe community. However, this is not an Own Voices review. I am a Yurok tribal member of California. Indigenous tribes, nations, and peoples are not monolithic. We all have our own experiences, storytellings, teachings. Some of it may be similar in some aspects, but ultimately we are our own entity and we are not monolithic. So this is not an Own Voices review, but it is an Own Voices book. I will leave other Indigenous reviews of this book down in the description down below. So I'm actually not going to talk about the synopsis much at all. We follow 18-year-old Dani Fontaine, who is biracial and an unenrolled tribal member. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it, mostly because I went into this book not knowing much of anything aside from what I've heard from other Indigenous reviewers. Erin from Erin's Library, Dani from Thunderbirdwomanreads, Alexis from Little Lion's Library. I read their reviews and thought it was fantastic. I thought they were fantastic enough that that's all I went in with. And I'm glad I did. And even, I believe Erin has said in her review that if you go in not knowing much of anything, that's probably the best way. So if you want to know the synopsis, I'll link the link to Firekeeper's Daughter on Goodreads down in the description down below. But otherwise, I'm not going to talk about much of anything other than my thoughts on the book. I will give you content warning though. This is a YA thriller, and even Erin had said that this is more of a YA crime novel. So there is content warning for sexual assault, suicide, gun violence, murder, drug use, meth addiction, alcohol use, colonization, trauma, grief and loss. So bear that in mind if you are sensitive at all to any of those topics before you go into this book. Now, I actually had attempted to go into this book reading it through the e-arc that I got from Henry Holt and Company. However, I am so grateful for the advanced listeners copy from Lero, because this book actually contains a lot of Anishinaabe language. And I can't say if the accuracy of the advanced listener copy is accurate to the Anishinaabe language, but I did appreciate not having that pressure of knowing if that was if I was pronouncing correctly in my own head. I know it shouldn't matter, but I know it, like, I don't know, but I really appreciated it. And one thing with the advanced listeners copy is that I enjoy listening to my books because I like to do things with my hands. As someone who is a freelance illustrator as well as an administrative assistant, I'm kind of constantly working. I like to be able to listen to a good book as I'm working, particularly if I'm working on something that doesn't need all of my mental capacity. This book, however, needed my mental capacity, most of my mental capacity. There were times where I was listening for hours and was just staring out the window because I didn't want to do anything else. It just captured me so much, and not to say that that necessarily bugged me at all. I actually really enjoy a book that is able to do that. And I even said within the first 30% of this book, I laughed, I cried, I got pissed, and I missed my community. And that's one thing about this book that I absolutely loved, was a sense of community. And particularly during quarantine, during this whole pandemic, I haven't been to a ceremony in 2 years. We canceled them in 2020, and I had just started getting back into them in 2019, and had been looking forward to the 2020 ceremonies with vigor. And we didn't have it. Which completely is understandable. Our tribes did not want to risk losing our elders, and everyone agreed. However, as someone who felt like I was just reconnecting with that community and reconnecting with my culture, it felt like a loss, and kind of makes me feel even more isolated than quarantine. I don't know, than just quarantine. But with this book, it actually kind of gave me some of that I missed with ceremonies, some of that camaraderie, some of that, like Angeline Boulley took us through like all the senses of like the sounds I would hear, the smells I would smell, the food I would taste, and even some of the regalia. Anishinabe's regalia is going to be different from the Yurok tribes, or any tribes around here. It's going to be fairly different. However, I did end up getting some inspiration just listening to the descriptions of some of these jingle dresses and some of these different necklaces and feather fans, and I was just like, oh my god, I was so just mesmerized and inspired. It made me want to pick up my regalia and see all I needed to finish in order to be prepared for when ceremony comes back. And really, that's what this book helps me realize, was just like, it gave me that taste and encouragement to be ready for the next time, that there will be a next time, that this is what our persistence leads to, is more of our community and more of our camaraderie and more of our culture. That all within the first 30%. The rest of the book kept me on edge. The first 30% was like a taster for the rest of the book. There was multiple sections where I laughed. There was more sections where I cried, and I was there for Dani. Dani is a fantastic, strong-ass female character, and I absolutely loved it. I loved following her story. Despite her being unenrolled, the connection she had with her community and her culture was absolutely fantastic, and that struggle between loving some of her family members that ultimately don't love her native side of her, it was, oh my god, it felt like a conflict that I hadn't seen before. And despite knowing that it exists, it was something that I didn't quite expect to see in a book, and it was really nice. It was something that a lot of people don't tend to think about, and it's that internal struggle that particularly all of us think about it, I feel like, to some degree, but it's like, it feels so personal that I was surprised to see it in a book. What I also appreciated was just the different characters in this book. I could see them in my community, from the good and the bad. Like, as soon as I got to know a character a little more, people kept popping into my mind. Like I said, good and bad. I laughed with some of them. There's some of them that I'm like, ew, yeah, you don't go near him. So, not just in our Indigenous community, but in society in general. And that's something too, that this book really went into some of this, like some heavy discussions on some of the problems that faces our community, in our Indigenous community. Trauma, addiction, murdered, missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, grief and loss. And yeah, it was intense at times, and I thought that Angeline Boulley did a fantastic job in being able to discuss these topics without being overly detailed or overly heavy about it. It made them, it was to the point and important, I felt like. So, and it did it in a way that actually, she did it in a way that actually surprised me, in that in the end I was like, oh, fuck. It was like stuff that I even forgot, that once she brought it up I was like, oh, dang. Like, what? So that's something that I really appreciated. And if you're at all like cautionary on not wanting to go into this because it's YA, don't. It feels very, felt to me more new adult with like connections to young adult, if that makes sense at all. Yeah. I'm just thinking, it like reminded me of, we have a ceremony, we have a ceremony that we do here every summer, and it's for the girls that become women. And John has talked about this a couple times within this book about a similar ceremony. I believe it's a coming of age ceremony, but here it's a coming of age ceremony for our girls coming into women. And there's a part of the ceremony where we run, and we run and kids chase us. The kids are trying to make us laugh. And we can laugh. It just means we get more wrinkles when we're older. And we can look back, but the whole point is to go forward and know your path. And that's something that this book I felt was fairly reflective of, is that because Donis had talked about her new normal, that she has to adjust to a new normal, and like she wanted everything to go back to the old normal. And that's something that this ceremony kind of instills in us, is that when we are running, yes, we can, it's not encouraged to look back, but you can, but the whole point is to keep going forward, keep moving forward. And that's something that I thought really reflected well in this book, and that I really appreciated. Like I said, we're not monolithic. Indigenous peoples, nations, and tribes are not monolithic. However, finding some of the similarities and the differences are really fun to me when it comes to reading from an author of another tribe, nation, or people. And it went with other things too, grief and just some of the jurisdictional struggles that we deal with, as well as some of the loopholes that people get away with. So there is heavier topics in here. I felt that this book was pretty well balanced out between thriller and romance. Definitely a push-pull to them, and of course there was an occasional comedic relief that I absolutely adored. I think that's all I really have to say about this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I highly encourage everyone to pick it up and read it. I really enjoyed this. I particularly really enjoyed the sciencey elements to it. Sciencey elements, as well as the traditional thing, as well as the traditional medicines, traditional teachings, because in ways they kind of go hand in hand. And I absolutely enjoyed it, which is interesting just because there is this need for science to consider Indigenous teachings that would help the earth right now, particularly when it comes to prescribed burns in California and on the West Coast to help prevent wildfires, particularly during the late summer, as well as climate change. So this is going to be one that I think about for a while. I'm not quite calling it my favorite of 2021 just yet, but it is up there. It is one of my favorite of all time, and I can't wait for my physical edition to come in. I pre-ordered that a while back, and I can't wait for it. I encourage you to pre-order. That's the best way to support an author, particularly a debut author. That was one thing that like blew my mind. Angeline, Boulley, this is her debut novel, and it was fantastic. We're getting some great debuts, Indigenous debuts, and I love it. Me not saying the synopsis bugged you, I apologize for any inconvenience. But like I said, that description, the link for the synopsis will be down in the description down below, as well as any other Indigenous reviews of this book. I highly encourage you to check them out as well. And I will have links as well down below. It's felt really appropriate, particularly for missing murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, MMIW G2S. There are multiple links and of organizations down in the description down below, with donation links as well as shared resources. Please do your research, donate, and share where you can. I know that there's been a couple of organizations throughout US and Canada, and recently throughout Latin America, which is definitely needed as well as Turnout, which is an organization down in the Bay Area of California that help provide the LGBTQ community with relief, COVID relief, volunteer work. I think right now they're still looking for mentorship volunteers as well as Pride volunteers. So that will be down in the description down below as well. Otherwise, I highly suggest you check this out. If you have, let me know what your thoughts were down in the comments down below. No spoilers, please. If you want to reach out to me on any other platform, I am on a variety of social medias: Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, Storygraph. I'm still trying to get on that more. But yeah, otherwise, I hope that you were in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading, and I will talk to you again soon. Cheers.